My name is Jermaine Thurman. I'm 76 years old, a retired telegraph lineman, and I live here in Richmond, Virginia, in the heart of the South. Every bend of the James River holds a story, but the one I'm going to tell you today is perhaps the most painful I've ever lived through. It's a wound that, though scarred over, still aches when the memories return. But I feel like I need to share it because maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else who is going through the same thing without realizing it. The life of a man who worked with telegrams was never a calm one. For many years, I spent long periods away from home, traveling across the mid-Atlantic to install and repair the lines that connected our country before the internet came along. While I was out there decoding messages, I left behind my wife, Serena, and our son, Preston, a child who was the light of my eyes. Preston was always a timid little boy, the type who spoke softly and asked permission even to breathe. At first, I thought that was just his way. Serena would say, "He took after my father, who was also quiet." But as time went by, I started noticing something different. When I had come home from a trip, the boy would run to hug me, but then he'd quickly retreat to his corner, as if he were afraid of being a bother. "It's just a phase," Serena would say. "Just kid stuff," she'd repeat every time I commented on his behavior. His grades in school weren't what they used to be. The teacher sent home notes saying he was distracted, that he wasn't participating in activities like before. I confess that with the long hours spent deciphering codes and signals, I ended up believing it was just a phase. One thing that seemed kind of sweet to me was how religious Serena had become. Every night, exactly at 9 o'clock, she would take Preston to the bedroom and say it was time for prayer. "I'm teaching him values," she'd say proudly. The door was always closed because, according to her, it was an intimate moment between mother and son, a special connection. I, a simple man raised on collard greens and cornbread since childhood, respected it. I even found that dedication beautiful. But something bothered me. Preston, who was already quiet, became even more withdrawn after those times. On one occasion, when I mentioned I would have to travel the next day to fix a telegraph line in New York City, I saw a terror in his eyes that I couldn't explain. He looked at his mother with a fear that chilled me to the bone, like the cold water of the James River. "Dad, do you really have to go?" he asked, his voice cracking. "It's his job, boy. Stop being silly," Serena answered, before I could say anything. That night, Preston hugged me tighter than usual when I put him to bed and said something that should have set off an alarm in my head. "When you're not here, Mom changes." If you're enjoying my story, please hit the like button to cheer up this old heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next life stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there now. It makes me happy to know from what corner of the country and at what moment of the day you're listening to me. In my mind, it was just a son missing his father. How wrong I was, how blind I was for so long. Life on the road made me miss a lot of things, but I never imagined I was missing something so serious, happening right under my own roof, beneath the red asphalt shingles of that house by the river. My childhood was very different from Preston's. I was born and raised in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where the sky is bluer than anywhere else. Son of a fisherman, I learned early to respect the oceans and the animals. My father, a man of few words, taught me more by example than by sermons. When he came back from fishing, he always brought a flounder, a striped bass, sometimes even a big drumfish that barely fit in the boat. Our house was simple, with dirt floors and a roof that sang when the rain poured down hard. Mom made the best seafood chowder in the region and roasted sweet potatoes over the coals while telling stories of the folks up north. On full moon nights, we'd sit on the porch to hear the call of the night birds, the croaking of the frogs, the symphony of the coast that never hushes. In school, I was shy, but not out of fear. It was more out of admiration. I was captivated by letters, by numbers, by stories of distant places. Ms. Beverly, my teacher, God rest her soul, noticed my interest and started teaching me Morse code when she found out I wanted to be a telegraph operator. Germaine has the gift of communication, she'd tell my mother, who smiled proudly while braiding straw to make baskets. I learned the letters and numbers in code. I practiced by tapping my finger on the table, using a flashlight at night, whistling the signals while fishing with Dad. Those dots and dashes fascinated me. It was like I could talk to the world without opening my mouth. Incredible. When the opportunity came to work for the telegraph company up in New York City, Mom cried in private, but she encouraged me. Dad gave me a pocket knife as a gift, one of those useful for everything, and just said, "Oh, go, son. The world is too big to stay in one place." It was the longest sentence I ever heard him say. At 18, I left North Carolina carrying only a cardboard suitcase with 2 changes of clothes, my father's knife, and my mother's blessing, along with a bottle of mint tea she prepared to cure any ailment. The train crossed the countryside, and I was glued to the window, watching the coast fade away but carrying it inside me. In New York City, I went to work at the main telegraph station. The boss, Mr. Henderson, a serious but fair man, soon realized I had a knack for the job. In a short time, I was already helping to train the rookies. My hands, calloused from fishing, now danced on the key, transmitting messages that connected families, closed business deals, announced births, and farewells. It was during that time that I met Serena. She worked at the diner next to the station and always served me extra strong coffee when I came in for the graveyard shift. A beautiful woman with an easy smile and penetrating eyes. We talked about everything, about the starry sky back in North Carolina, about the floods of the James River, about the books she liked to read. Unlike me, Serena had studied quite a bit. She spoke beautifully, knew poetry, dreamed of being a teacher someday. I fell in love with that intelligence, that determined way she had. When she smiled, it seemed like the sun was rising again, even at midnight. After a few months, I worked up the courage and invited her for a walk in the park after work. She accepted. I remember it like it was yesterday. She was wearing a light blue dress, a flower in her hair, and jasmine perfume. We walked through the park, ate lemon bars, and drank a soda sitting on a bench under an oak tree. The moon shone as only it shines in the mid-Atlantic, big and imposing, illuminating the river in the distance. It was there, under that full moon, that I took her hand for the first time. My heart was pounding faster than the telegraph during heavy rain. When messages piled up, little did I know that those hands, so soft that night, would one day be instruments of so much pain for our son. How could I imagine that that voice that recited Langston Hughes's verses with such sweetness would one day utter such cruel words? Life has those ironies that you only understand when it's too late. But back then, everything was hope and dreams. The meetings in the park turned into boat rides on the lake, visits to the Sunday market, and attending local church festivals with bonfires and traditional gospel music. Serena loved to dance. She'd spin like a top to the rhythm. She would pull me by the hand while I, shy as I'd always been, tried to follow her steps. When I asked for Serena's hand in marriage, I did it the traditional way. I went to talk to her father, Mr. Wallace, a respected shop owner in the city. I was shaking from head to toe, but I kept my composure. I want to marry your daughter, sir. I'm a hard worker. I have a steady job with the utility company, and I love Serena more than anything in this life. Mr. Wallace looked me up and down, lit his pipe, and said, "Northern boy, huh? Good hard-working folk. My daughter deserves the best." He paused for what seemed like an eternity, blew out a puff of smoke, and finished, "If she wants you, you have my blessing." The wedding was simple in the small community church. Serena was beautiful, in a white dress sewn by her mother. I was nervous in a borrowed suit, but happier than I'd ever been. The reception was in her parents' backyard with barbecue, potato salad, fried catfish, and even a small band playing old R&B tunes. That rhythm of ours, the music of the South, that makes anyone move their feet. We started our married life in a rented apartment near the station. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that seemed like enough. Serena got a job as an assistant at a school, the first step toward realizing her dream of being a teacher. I continued at the telegraph office, now with more responsibilities and a slightly better salary. Life went on its quiet course, like the waters of the James River on calm days. Until one day, Serena gave me the news that would change everything. We were expecting a child. The happiness I felt at that moment is beyond words. I was going to be a father, a little piece of me and her, a new life that would bring even more meaning to our existence. I was prepared to be a father. I would know how to protect my son from all the dangers in the world. Life would soon teach me that danger doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it's right under our noses, inside our own home, hidden in the person we least expect. Serena's pregnancy was a period of ups and downs. At first, she felt sick all day. The smell of food made her nauseous. She cried over the smallest things. I did everything I could to please her. I looked for fresh sweet potato pies at the market. I prepared the mint tea that my mother said was good for calming things down. I massaged her swollen feet after a day of work. As her belly grew, Serena became more beautiful and more irritable at the same time. She complained that she was fat, that she wouldn't be able to teach anymore, that our apartment was too small for a baby. I tried to calm her down. I told her everything would be fine, that we were in this together. Don't you understand, Jermaine? You're not the one carrying this child. She'd yell sometimes, slamming the bedroom door and leaving me confused in the living room, wondering what I had done wrong. The midwife, Mrs. Green, a wise woman who had delivered half the children in the city, reassured me. That's just how it is, Mr. Thurman. Women get a little strange when they're expecting the hormones, you know? Just be patient. And I had patience. It was never a problem for me. In the telegraph office, you learn to wait for the right moment, to calmly decipher messages, to find meaning in the signals. Preston was born on a stormy night, one of those that turn the southern sky into a spectacle of lightning and thunder. The waters of the James rose so high they almost flooded the houses closest to the bank. Serena went into labor 2 days earlier than expected, and I had to carry her in my arms to Mrs. Green's house with the rain beating down on our backs. They were hours of agonizing waiting. Sitting on the porch, I heard Serena's cries inside and prayed silently to the Lord, as my mother had taught me, until finally a loud cry broke through the storm. The cry of a healthy baby, a clear set of lungs that seemed to defy the tempest outside. When I entered the room and saw that tiny thing in Serena's arms, my heart almost leapt out of my mouth. Preston was perfect. He had his mother's eyes, my father's button nose, and a handful of dark hair on his head. His tiny hands opened and closed, as if he were sending messages in Morse code. "Look, Serena. He looks like he already wants to be a telegraph operator, just like his dad." I joked, thrilled. She looked at the baby, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher at the time. It wasn't exactly joy or pride. It was something like disappointment or tiredness. I couldn't tell. I put it down to the exhaustion of childbirth. "I hope he has more ambition than you, Germaine," she replied, adjusting the baby on her chest. The first few months with Preston were an adjustment period. Serena seemed lost in caring for the baby. She got irritated when he cried. She complained that she had no time for anything. I tried to help as much as I could, but my job demanded increasingly long absences. The telegraph network was expanding inland, and I was one of the few experienced technicians available to install and repair lines in distant cities. "Are you going to leave me alone with this child again?" Serena would complain every time I needed to travel. "It's how we pay the bills, Serena." "I don't have a choice," I explained, my heart heavy with leaving them. When Preston was about 2 years old, I managed to get a transfer to Richmond. It was a larger, growing city in the center of the state. The James River flowed through the city, reminding me a little of my North Carolina home. We bought a simple, but our own, little house with a small yard where Preston could play. Serena got a job as a secretary at a municipal school. It wasn't what she dreamed of, but it was something. Preston grew up handsome and smart. He liked to listen to the stories I told about the Outer Banks, about the animals and the ocean. His eyes would sparkle when I imitated the roar of a wildcat or the cry of an eagle. He had a sweet manner, a natural curiosity, a laugh that was pure music. With Serena, however, the relationship was different. She was impatient with his questions, his games, his childish energy. "Boy, hold still. Can't you see I'm tired?" was the most common thing we heard in the house. I tried to make up for it by playing with him when I was home, taking him fishing in the James, teaching him to recognize the tracks of animals on the riverbank, and identifying edible plants like berries and pecans. But my work trips became more and more frequent. America was modernizing, the telegraph was reaching increasingly remote places, and I was needed. I spent days, sometimes weeks, away from home, traveling through the interiors of Virginia and the Carolinas, installing equipment, training new operators, and fixing lines damaged by storms. When I returned, I found Preston quieter, more withdrawn. At first, I thought it was just him missing me. Then I began to think it was just his nature, shy like I was as a child. Serena said he was the same way at school, that the teacher complained he didn't participate, that he stayed in his own corner. "This boy takes after you, Germaine. Quiet, no ambition. He's going to have a hard time in life," she'd comment, not realizing how those words could hurt the little boy playing on the living room floor. It was when Preston was about 6 years old that Serena started with the prayers. It all began after she befriended Miss Beverly, a very religious woman in the neighborhood. Ms. Beverly talked a lot about the importance of discipline, of bending the rod while the tree is young, of not sparing correction. Jermaine, we need to give Preston a religious education. He's too rebellious, Serena told me one day when I returned from a trip. Rebellious? Our Preston? But he's so quiet, I replied, confused. That's what you see. When you're not here, he gives me a lot of trouble. He doesn't listen. He doesn't do his homework. He talks back. I looked at Preston, who was playing in the yard with a slingshot I had made for him. I couldn't see rebellion in that thin boy with the sweet eyes. But Serena was the one who spent the most time with him. So maybe she was right. And what are you planning to do? I asked. I'm going to teach him to pray, to reflect on his actions every day before bed, a moment just for mother and son. It seemed like a good idea. My own mother had taught me to pray from a young age, to be thankful for the food on the plate, for the roof over our heads, for the family's health. Faith had always been a comfort in difficult times, a company on lonely nights away from home. If Preston learned that early, it would be good for him. Excellent idea, Serena. I'm glad you're worrying about that. And so began the nightly prayer sessions. Every night at 9 o'clock, Serena would take Preston to the bedroom, close the door, and they would stay there for 30 to 40 minutes. When they came out, Preston was always quiet with his head down and went straight to bed without saying a word. When I was home, I sometimes tried to join those prayers. Let me go with you today. I want to teach him the Lord's Prayer that my mother taught me, I suggested once. No need, Jermaine. It's a mother-son moment. You wouldn't understand, Serena replied dryly. I didn't insist. I respected that space she was creating. I even thought it was nice. How could I imagine that behind that closed door there were no prayers, but muffled screams? That there was no reflection, but terror? That the hands that should bless were actually punishing? Preston began to change. The happy and curious boy was replaced by a silent and fearful child. His grades in school plummeted. The teacher sent notes saying he was inattentive, that he flinched at any sudden movement. Those are exaggerations, Serena would say. He just wants attention. He's jealous of your trips. And I, fool that I was, believed her. Until that night when I resolved to stay and discovered the terrible truth hidden in our own house. With Preston already in school, our lives settled into a routine. I continued working for the utility company, now with the responsibility of overseeing the installation of new lines throughout the state. The job was good. It paid our bills, and we even had a little left over to save. We even managed to buy a new radio, one of those with polished wood, that played the songs of Sam Cooke and Marvin Gaye on Sunday afternoons. Our house in Richmond was simple, but cozy. It was near the James River, on a dirt road where the kids played ball and flew kites. We had a yard with mango, guava, and avocado trees. I even planted a pecan tree, knowing it would take years to bear fruit. It's for Preston's future, I'd say, as I carefully watered the sapling. Serena worked as a secretary at the municipal school. It wasn't what she dreamed of. She had always wanted to be a teacher. But the salary helped with expenses, and she said she liked the atmosphere. Over time, she became more involved with the local church. She participated in the prayer group, helped with the fundraisers, and was always talking to Reverend Miller after services. Religion is doing me a lot of good, Jermaine, she'd say, and I was happy for her. My own faith was always quieter, the kind you practice every day without much display. I learned from my father that God is more in the actions than in the words. Preston was growing up, now about 8 years old. In school, he was an average student, neither the best nor the worst. He especially liked science classes when the teacher talked about animals and plants. At home, he spent hours leafing through an old encyclopedia I bought from a street vendor, fascinated by the colorful pictures of exotic animals. This boy is going to be a biologist, I joked proudly. A biologist. And what's he going to earn with that? Barely enough to eat. Serena responded, cutting off my enthusiasm. On my days off, I took Preston fishing in the James. Sitting on the riverbank with our makeshift bamboo rods, we spent hours talking. Or rather, I talked, and he listened, with those attentive eyes that seemed to absorb every word. Dad, tell me again what North Carolina is like, he'd ask. And I'd describe the arid fields, the flocks of eagles that looked like clouds in the blue sky, the bobcats that drank water at dusk, the lizards sunning themselves on the banks. One day, I'll take you there, son. You'll meet your grandparents, the land where I was born. Preston would smile, but it was a sad smile, as if he didn't really believe that day would come. Today I understand why. For a child living in fear, the future is always uncertain. At home, Preston was almost a shadow. He walked silently through the rooms, careful not to make noise. He played alone in the yard, talking softly to his wooden dolls that I carved on my trips. When Serena came home from work, he'd already run to put away his toys to leave everything tidy. "At least you do that much right," she'd say, never a full compliment, always with a criticism. Work trips kept taking me further away. The country was growing, new cities were popping up, and communication was vital. I started being away for 2-3 weeks straight. When I came back, I noticed small changes in Preston. A more guarded look, a start when I raised my voice to call Serena, a tremor in his hands when serving himself at the table. "What's wrong with him?" I asked once. "Nothing. He's just shy. He takes after you," Serena responded, and the matter died there. On one of those returns home, after almost a month installing telegraph lines in the northern part of the state, I found Preston with a purple bruise on his arm. "What happened there, son?" I asked, concerned. Before he could answer, Serena intervened. "He fell out of the tree in the schoolyard. I've told him 1,000 times not to climb trees, but this boy won't listen to me." Preston lowered his eyes, confirming with an almost imperceptible nod. I believed her, of course. Why wouldn't I? Kids fall, they get hurt. It's part of childhood. I myself had eternally scraped knees when I was a boy. What I didn't know was that mark was just the tip of the iceberg. That under his clothes, other marks were hidden. Marks of a violence I couldn't even imagine, happening in my own house. Our family life looked normal to outsiders. On Sundays, we went to church together. Afterward, we had lunch at Mrs. Hayes' house, who made the best peach cobbler in town. Preston played with her children, always quieter than the other kids, always the last to join the games, always the first to want to leave. "That boy sure is strange," commented Mr. Davis, Mrs. Hayes' husband. "He looks afraid of his own shadow." "It's his way," I'd defend him. "Not everyone has to be loud." Deep down, however, I too was starting to worry. As Preston grew, he seemed to close in on himself instead of opening up to the world, as is natural for children. When he saw me packing my suitcase for another trip, his eyes filled with a terror I didn't understand. "I'll bring you a nice gift," I'd promise, trying to cheer him up. "I don't need gifts, Dad. Just come back soon," he'd reply, with an urgency in his voice that squeezed my heart. It was during this time that the nightly prayers became more frequent and longer. If before they happened 2 or 3 times a week, now they were daily. Bye. If before they lasted half an hour, now they extended for almost an hour. "Preston needs more spiritual guidance," Serena explained. "He's being very rebellious at school." The teacher's notes, however, said the opposite. "Preston is extremely quiet and submissive. I worry about his lack of initiative and his constant fear of making mistakes. When I showed this to Serena, she shrugged. It's because he knows how to behave at school. It's different at home. His grades began to fall. From an average student, he started having difficulties in almost every subject. His handwriting, which used to be so nice, became shaky, almost illegible. At school meetings, Principal Evans showed concern. Has something happened with Preston? He always looks tired, scared. He doesn't play at recess. He doesn't talk to his classmates. It's just a phase, Serena would reply with that smile that fooled anyone. We're handling it. Don't worry. I blamed myself for my absences. Maybe if I were more present, Preston wouldn't be having these difficulties. I talked to my boss, asked to reduce my travel to be closer to home. I got a better schedule that allowed me to come back every 10 days. In the first few weeks of this new routine, I noticed a change in Preston. He smiled more when I was home. He told me things about school. He even showed me a drawing he'd made in art class. A family of fish in the river, swimming together. That's the three of us, he explained, pointing to the fish. The big one is you, Dad. The medium one is Mom. And the little one is me. And why are we in the river? I asked, curious. Because in the river we're free. We can swim wherever we want. Those words touched me deeply, although I didn't fully understand their meaning at the time. Today I know it was a silent cry for freedom, for escape. Serena seemed uncomfortable with my more constant presence. The prayers with Preston continued, but she would wait until I was distracted watching the evening news or fixing some appliance in the laundry room. You can pray here in the living room with me, I suggested one night. No, Jermaine, it's our moment. You wouldn't understand, she insisted, with a firmness that allowed no argument. And so, even more physically present, I remained excluded from that part of my son's life. I remained blind to what was happening behind that closed door, to the terror my son lived through almost every night, until that night came, the night that changed everything, that opened my eyes to a reality I refused to see, which was there under my nose all along. The night I finally heard the scream. It was a typical Wednesday night in Richmond, hot during the day and with a cool breeze at night. I had returned from a short trip to New York City, where I participated in a training session on new equipment. I was tired, but happy to be home earlier than expected. Serena wasn't expecting me back that night. According to my schedule, I was only supposed to arrive on Thursday, but I caught a ride with a truck driver heading toward Richmond and moved up my return. I arrived home around 8 o'clock. The lights were on, but no one appeared to greet me when I knocked on the door. Strange, I thought. I used my key and slipped in silently. I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Serena was speaking in a severe tone to Preston. You're going to have to pray double tonight. Understand? Your teacher told me you got every single math problem wrong. Everyone. How can you be so dense? I stood still in the hallway, unsure whether to interrupt or not. Something told me to wait, to observe. Sorry, Mom, I tried, but I couldn't remember how to do the division. Preston's voice was barely a whisper. You couldn't, because you don't pay attention. Your head is in the clouds, just like your father, who never amounted to anything in life. That hurt, but I remained silent. I wanted to understand what was going on before I made my presence known. Dad works hard, Mom. He brings money home. There was a sound of a slap on the table. Don't talk back to me. Who do you think you are? If your father were someone important, He wouldn't still be driving all over the state, fixing telegraph wires like some common laborer. "Sorry, Mom," Preston murmured again. I felt my blood boil, but I held myself back. This was not the time to confront Serena. I needed to understand first what happened when I wasn't around. I quietly retreated and left the house. I walked around the block and knocked on the door loudly, as if I were arriving at that exact moment. "Hey, I'm home early," I announced cheerfully. Serena appeared at the door with a forced smile. Preston came right behind her, and his eyes lit up when he saw me and received my hug. "Dad, you're back." "Oh, what a surprise, Jermaine. We weren't expecting you today," Serena said with a completely different tone of voice than the one I had heard minutes earlier. I caught a ride and got ahead of schedule. I missed my family. Dinner went on in a strange atmosphere. Serena talked about things from church, about how Reverend Miller had praised her dedication to the prayer group. Preston ate in silence, staring at his plate. Every now and then, I noticed Serena giving him harsh looks, especially when I wasn't paying attention. After dinner, Preston went to do his homework at the kitchen table. I stayed in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but in reality, I was watching the interaction between mother and son through the slightly open door. "Show me that homework," Serena demanded, snatching the notebook from Preston's hands. "It's all wrong again? You never learn." "Can I help, son?" I offered, getting up from the couch. Math was my favorite subject in school. Serena quickly closed the notebook. "No need, Jermaine. Preston and I will solve this. Besides, it's time for his prayer." She grabbed his arm with force, too much force, I noticed, and pulled him toward the bedroom. Preston gave me a look of plea that I was finally beginning to decipher. "Can I join the prayer tonight?" I asked, following them down the hallway. "I already told you no, Jermaine. It's our time. Go rest. You must be tired from the trip." The bedroom door closed, and I heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. I stood there in the hallway for a few moments, confused and uneasy. Something was very wrong, but I still couldn't name it. I still didn't want to believe it. I went back to the living room and turned on the TV, turning up the volume. Then silently, I went back to the hallway and put my ear against the bedroom door. At first, I only heard murmurs, Serena's voice reciting something that seemed like a prayer, but I couldn't make out the words. Then her voice started to rise. "Repeat after me. I am a disobedient boy who needs correction." Preston's voice, shaky. "I am a disobedient boy who needs correction. I don't pay attention in school because I am lazy. I don't pay attention in school because..." Preston's voice failed. "Because you are lazy. Louder. I can't hear you. I don't pay attention in school because I am lazy." Preston's voice was now choked with tears. Then came a sound that chilled my blood. The unmistakable sound of a belt or a paddle striking skin. Once, twice, 3 times, followed by Preston's muffled crying. "Be quiet. If your father hears, it will be worse." More blows, more muffled crying. I felt my heart racing, my hands shaking. What was happening? This was what she called prayers? This is so you learn to get your math right. This is so you stop being dense like your father. I was paralyzed, split between the shock and the urgent need to act. One more blow, and then there was something that snapped me out of my stupor. A scream, a genuine cry of pain that Preston couldn't hold back. I didn't think twice. With all the force I had, I shoved the door. The lock gave way, and the door burst open. The scene I saw will forever be etched in my memory. Preston was huddled in the corner of the room, his legs marked with red welts, his hands trying to shield his face. Serena stood over him with a leather belt in her hand, her eyes wide with surprise at seeing me. "What are you doing?" I shouted, barely recognizing my own voice. "I'm educating your son, since you don't do anything," she responded without an ounce of remorse. "He needs to learn." I walked past her and went straight to Preston. When I crouched down to touch him, he flinched even more, as if expecting to be hit too. That broke my heart into a million pieces. "It's okay, son. Dad is here. No one is going to hit you." Slowly, he lifted his eyes, full of tears and fear. "Sorry, Dad. I tried to do the math, but I couldn't." "You don't have to apologize, my son. You didn't do anything wrong." I looked at his legs, covered in marks. "Does this happen whenever I travel?" Preston nodded, unable to speak. Then I looked at Serena, a person I no longer recognized, a stranger, with the face of the woman I had loved. "Get out of the room," I ordered with a voice that allowed no argument. "Jermaine, you don't understand. This child needs discipline. He's just like you. No ambition, no—" "Get out of the room now," I roared. And she backed away, surprised by my reaction. Never, in all the years of our marriage, had I raised my voice against her. She stormed out, slamming the door. I stayed alone with Preston, who was trembling like a leaf. "Son, why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. She said if I told you wouldn't believe me, that you would hit me too, that you would send me away. Every word was like a stab. How could he think I would do that? But then I remembered all the times I missed the signs, that I didn't believe the changes in his behavior, that I blindly trusted Serena. "This happens every night when you travel, Dad," he continued softly. "She says they're prayers, but they're not. It's just hitting me and saying I'm dense, that I'm just like you." I embraced my son, careful not to hurt him further. He was so thin, so fragile in my arms. How did I not realize sooner? How was I so blind? "Never again, Preston. This will never happen again. I promise you." That night, I made the decision that would change our lives forever. A decision I should have made a long time ago if I had seen the signs, if I had listened to my son's screaming silence. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. That night, after calming Preston down and tucking him into my bed, I went to the living room where Serena was waiting. She was sitting on the couch with her hands clasped in her lap, a defiant expression on her face, as if I were the one in the wrong in the story. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice low so as not to wake Preston. "There's nothing to talk about, Jermaine. You don't understand what it's like to raise a child. You're out there traveling all over the country while I have to deal with everything here. That's not raising a child, Serena. That's abuse. It's cruelty." She laughed that way that always made me feel small. "Abuse? You think discipline is abuse? My father raised me that way, and look at me. I have an education. I have respect." "What you have is hate," I replied, surprised by my own clarity. "Hate toward me, hate toward Preston, hate toward the life you have." Her face twisted into an expression of rage I had never seen before. "And you think I dreamed of this? Being the wife of a telegraph lineman, living in this backwater, having a slow child just like his father? I deserved more, Jermaine." Her words hurt me, but they no longer held the same power over me. Something had changed inside me that night. It was as if a veil had been torn from my eyes. "Then why did you stay? Why did you marry me? Why did you have a child?" "Because I thought you were going to move up in life. That you would become a boss, a manager, I don't know. That we would go live in the city, have a decent life. But no, you settle for so little, just like your son. I shook my head incredulous. After so many years together, only now did I see who was truly standing in front of me. I want you to leave the house, I said firmly. What? She looked like she couldn't believe it. You heard me. I'm not going to allow you to keep hurting our son. Tomorrow, I'm going to seek help. Report what you've been doing. She jumped up, her face red with fury. You can't kick me out. This house is mine too. This house now belongs to Preston. A place where he can grow up without fear, without being humiliated, without being hit. No one will believe you, Jermaine. I'm the one who goes to school meetings. I'm the one who goes to church. I'm the one who talks to the neighbors. Everyone knows I'm a good mother. The marks on Preston's body tell another story. She changed tactics, trying to approach me with a pleading look. Jermaine, let's talk calmly. I admit I overreacted today. I was stressed. But you can't separate a child from his mother. That's inhuman. Inhuman is what you've been doing to him every night when I'm gone. Hitting, humiliating, destroying his self-esteem. That is inhuman. It was only a few times, when he deserved it. It's discipline, Jermaine? No, Serena. It's cruelty. We stood in silence for a few moments, the air heavy between us, and outside, the swamp frogs sang, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside that small house by the James. If you report me, but I'm going to say you hit him too. That you're violent with me, she threatened, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Say whatever you want. Preston knows the truth, and the truth always comes out sooner or later. You'll regret this, Jermaine. You don't know who you're messing with. Yes, I do. Someone I loved once, but who turned into a monster I no longer recognize. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door, likely heading to a friend's house. I stood there in the living room, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. Relief for finally having faced the situation. Terror for what was to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I went back to the bedroom and found Preston awake, sitting up in bed, his eyes wide open. Mom left? He asked in a small voice. For now, yes. But we have a lot to talk about, son. I sat down next to him, and, for the first time, we had a real, unfiltered conversation. Slowly, Preston recounted everything that happened when I traveled. The prayers that were sessions of humiliation and violence. The punishments of going without food when he messed up his homework. The cruel words that destroyed his confidence day after day. She said I was dense, like you, Dad, he recounted, tears streaming down his face. That we would never amount to anything in life. That she regretted marrying you, regretted having me. Every word was a dagger in my chest. How can a father not perceive his own child's suffering? How was I so blind for so long? How long has this been happening, son? I think since forever, Dad. But it got worse when I started school. If I didn't get good grades, she got really mad. She said I was a family embarrassment. And why did you never tell me? He lowered his eyes. She said if I told you wouldn't believe me, that you would take her side, that you would hit me too. I felt a wave of rage and sadness wash over me. Serena had methodically destroyed Preston's trust in me, isolating him, making him believe he was alone against the world. Preston, look at me, kid, I pleaded, gently holding his chin. I believe you. I will always believe you. And I will never, ever let anyone hurt you again. Not your mother, not anyone. He looked at me with those eyes that looked like an old man's in a child's body, eyes that had seen too much pain. You promise, Dad? I promise, son, from my heart. That night, we both slept in my bed. Preston clung to my shirt as if he feared I would vanish during his sleep. In the early morning, he had nightmares, screaming in the dark, and I calmed him, telling him everything was okay, that I was right there. The next morning, early, I went to the police station. Sheriff Lee was a serious but fair man, known for not turning a blind eye to any kind of violence, not even domestic abuse, which many considered a private family problem. Mr. Thurman, this is a serious accusation, he said after hearing my story. We're going to need evidence, testimony. And you know how it is, right? A mother is a mother. People don't like to get involved in these things. I know, Sheriff Lee, but I can't keep pretending I don't see. My son is suffering. He scratched his grizzled chin, thoughtful. I'll send Deputy Johnson over to your house to see the boy, document the marks, and we're going to need the town doctor to examine him. We'll talk to the judge after that. Leaving the station, I stopped by Preston's school. Principal Evans received me with a surprised expression. Mr. Thurman, you here on a Monday? Aren't you traveling for work? No, Principal Evans. I came to talk about Preston's situation. I told her what I had discovered. The marks, the bruises. Her eyes widened, and she brought a hand to her mouth. My God, Mrs. Thurman always seemed so dedicated, so concerned about the boy's education. Appearances are deceiving, I replied bitterly. A lot of things make sense now, she commented thoughtfully. Preston's behavior, his fear, the grades dropping. I always thought there was something strange, but I never imagined. You think these things only happen in movies, you know? But they happen right under our noses, I said, feeling the weight of guilt once again. Principal Evans, I need your help. Can Preston's teacher confirm the changes in his behavior? It will be important for the case. Of course. Ms. Beverly noticed from the beginning of the year that Preston was different, quieter, scared. She even sent notes home to you. Notes I never saw, I murmured. Serena must have hidden them. I left the school with Principal Evans' promise that the teacher would go to the police station to give her testimony. It was a small step, but an important one. I returned home, where I had left Preston in the care of our neighbor, Ms. Thompson, a widow who had always been kind to us. She met me at the door with a look of understanding. Mr. Thurman, what a terrible thing to happen in this house. Preston showed me the marks. How could Mrs. Thurman do this to her own child? Sometimes we don't truly know people, even after living with them for years, I replied, feeling the burden of my blindness. Ms. Thompson hesitated. I need to confess something to you. I already suspected. Several times when you were traveling, I heard Preston crying at night. Once I even knocked on the door to ask if everything was okay, but Mrs. Thurman said he just had a stomachache. I felt a pang of anger. And why did you never tell me anything? She lowered her eyes, ashamed. You're afraid of getting involved, you know, of being called a busybody, of breaking up a family. But I should have spoken up. I know. Forgive me. I took a deep breath. It wasn't worth blaming Ms. Thompson. I was the father. I should have noticed. It's okay. The important thing is that now we know, and we're going to do something about it. That same day, Deputy Johnson came to our house, photographed the marks on Preston's body, and listened to his shaky but brave testimony. Afterward, we went to the health center, where Dr. Jenkins examined the boy and made a detailed report of the injuries. Some recent, others already scarred, showing that the abuse had been going on for a long time. At night, Serena returned, accompanied by Reverend Miller. Clearly, she had gone to find an ally, someone who could intercede on her behalf. Jermaine. This is madness, the Reverend began. Serena is a good Christian, an exemplary woman in our community. You need to resolve this as a family, through dialogue, through prayer. With all due respect, Reverend, you didn't see what I saw. You didn't hear what I heard. We all make mistakes sometimes, my son. Raising a child is full of challenges. I'm sure Serena is remorseful. I looked at her. She maintained an expression of false contrition, her eyes lowered, her hands clasped over her chest. A perfect performance. I'm sorry, Germaine, she murmured. I lost my head. It won't happen again. It's too late, I replied. I already filed a report. The case is with the police now. Her face instantly transformed. The mask of repentance gave way to fury. You fool. You're going to destroy our family over a few spankings. Everyone disciplines their kids. The Reverend looked stunned by the sudden change in behavior. Serena, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. This man is taking my son away from me. My son. This man is the father protecting his son, I replied without raising my voice. And they weren't just simple spankings, Serena. They were beatings, humiliations, psychological terror. She lunged at me, her fingernails ready to claw my face. But the Reverend held her back. Serena, for God's sake, you're only making your situation worse. At that moment, Preston appeared in the doorway of the living room, trembling at the sight of his mother. Son, come here to Mommy, Serena called, changing tactics again, her voice sweet as honey. Tell the Reverend that Mommy only corrected you when you did something wrong, that Mommy loves you. Preston looked at her, then at me, unsure. I nodded at him, encouraging him. He took a step forward, and, with a courage I didn't know he had, he said, Mom, you don't love me. You hurt me every day when Dad travels. You hit me with the belt, with the paddle. You say I'm dense, that I'm useless. Reverend Miller paled. Serena looked ashen. Liar, she screamed. Ungrateful, after everything I have done for you. I took Preston in my arms, shielding him. I think it's best if you leave now. We have a lot to resolve, and this will be done before the law, not before the church. Reverend Miller, visibly shaken, took Serena by the arm. Let's go, Serena. We need to talk. After they left, I hugged Preston tightly. You were very brave, son. Very brave. He looked at me with those huge eyes, still full of fear, but now also with a spark of hope. Things are going to be okay now, Dad. Yes, my son. I promise you they will. But I knew the battle had only just begun. The days that followed were intense. Our lives were turned upside down, like when the James overflows in major floods and sweeps everything away. But unlike the river that leaves destruction, this change, however painful, also brought an opportunity to start anew. The very next Tuesday, I received notification that the district judge had granted an urgent protective order. Serena was prohibited from approaching Preston or our house. The document, full of legal terms I barely understood, represented the first step toward protecting my son. What does that mean, Dad? Preston asked, seeing me read the paper with a serious expression. It means your mother can't come near you for now. It's for your safety. She's mad at me, right? For telling. I knelt down to be at his level. Preston, look at me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. You were brave and honest, and that's what matters. He nodded, but I noticed he still carried an enormous weight. The weight of guilt, which wasn't his, but which Serena had placed on his small shoulders for years. I went to the utility office and asked for a leave of absence from work. I explained the situation to my boss, Mr. Owens, who was visibly shocked. "But Mrs. Thurman, that woman, so religious, so dedicated?" he questioned, incredulous. "Appearances are deceiving," I simply replied. He scratched his gray head, thoughtful. "Look, Germaine, you have 2 weeks of leave. Anything more than that will be complicated. We have a lot of work, new lines going all the way to Philadelphia. I understand, Mr. Owens, but I can't leave my son alone right now. If necessary, I'll resign." His eyebrows shot up. "Hold on, son. You don't have to do that. We'll find a solution. Maybe we can transfer you to the central office right here. Less travel, more administrative work. You'll earn less, but—" "I accept," I replied without hesitation. "Money can be fixed. My son can't." I returned home, thinking about how to reorganize our lives. Preston didn't go to school that week. The doctor recommended rest for both his physical and emotional state. Ms. Thompson offered to stay with him when I needed to go out, and the neighbors, who had previously kept their distance out of respect or fear of getting involved, now showed up with peach cobblers, iced tea, and other gifts for the brave boy, as they began to call Preston. On Thursday, we went to the courthouse for the first hearing. Preston was nervous, clinging to my hand as if his life depended on it. Inside the small, stuffy room were the judge, Mr. Wallace, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, the prosecutor, Ms. Reynolds, a woman with a severe expression but kind eyes, and the social worker, Ms. Rodriguez, who had already visited our home. Serena arrived accompanied by a lawyer, Mr. Dubois, known in the city for defending difficult cases. She was well-dressed, wearing makeup, with a small Bible in her hands, the image of the devout, suffering mother. When she saw us, she shot me a look of contempt that quickly morphed into false sweetness when she noticed the judge observing her. The hearing was difficult. Preston had to recount everything that happened again, now in front of his mother. His little voice trembled, but he didn't back down. He described the prayers that were torture sessions, the punishments without food, the constant humiliations. "She said I was dense like my dad," he recounted, staring at his own hands, "that I would never amount to anything in life." Serena, of course, denied everything. She said they were just normal corrections, that Preston was exaggerating because he wanted attention. "He was always a difficult child, manipulative," she declared, with tears in her eyes that seemed rehearsed. "He invented this story because he knows his father is soft, that he will spoil him." But the evidence was compelling. The photos of the marks, the medical report showing old and recent injuries, the teacher's testimony confirming the change in behavior, the accounts of neighbors who heard crying every night. In the end, the judge maintained the protective order and ruled that Preston would remain in my sole custody until the definitive trial. Serena would have the right to supervised visits once a week in the presence of a court official or social worker. "It's not fair," she protested. "I'm his mother. A child needs his mother. A child needs safety and love," the judge replied in a tired but firm voice. "And the evidence shows that you have provided that, Mr. Thurman, not the mother." We left the courthouse with a mixture of relief and apprehension. It was a victory, but a temporary one. The process would continue. There would be more hearings, more testimonies. It would be a long and painful road. Preston started therapy with Dr. Rodriguez, a psychologist who came once a week from New York City to see patients in Richmond. She was a woman with white hair and a kind smile who had a special way of getting Preston to open up. "Your son is very strong, Mr. Thurman," she told me after the third session. He has been through things that would break many adults, but he can still smile. He can still trust. That is extraordinary. He takes after my mother, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. She was like that too. She went through storms, but always found a way to see the rainbow afterward. Slowly, our routine was established. I started working at the Central Telegraph office with a fixed schedule from 8 to 5. Preston returned to school, where he was warmly welcomed by Ms. Beverly, who made a point of praising him whenever he overcame a difficulty. The supervised visits with Serena were tense. Preston sat rigid in the chair, answering her questions with one-word replies. Serena alternated between trying to please him with promises of gifts and blaming him for what was happening. "Look what you did to our family," she whispered to him once, when the social worker was distracted for a moment. "You destroyed everything." Preston returned from that visit particularly upset. He took a long time to fall asleep, had nightmares, and wet the bed, something that hadn't happened in years. I talked to Dr. Rodriguez, who recommended suspending the visits for a while. He's not ready for that contact yet. He is reliving the trauma every time he sees her. The judge agreed, and the visits were suspended for 30 days. Serena was furious, but the decision stood. During that period, I received a letter from my parents. I had written to them, telling them about the situation, and their response was a balm to my weary soul. "Son, bring Preston here to spend some time in North Carolina," my mother wrote in that round, firm handwriting. "The clean air, the animals, the ocean, all of it heals any wound. And your old folks are getting lonely." I spoke to the judge, who authorized the trip during the school break in July, as long as we kept our address updated and returned for the scheduled hearings. It was the best decision I made. Seeing Preston running through the North Carolina fields, fishing with my father, learning to make fried pies with my mother, watching the eagles with wide eyes, it was like watching a wilted flower come back to life after the rain. "Tell me the story again about the bobcat you found," he'd ask every night, sitting on the porch of the simple house where I grew up. And my father, a man of few words, would unfold into stories and tales for his grandson, doing different voices, gesticulating, revealing a side I didn't even know. "This boy brings out the best in a person," my mother commented while we prepared breakfast. "He has a special light, Jermaine, but he needs care, like a plant that was mistreated. I'm trying, Mom, but sometimes I feel so lost." She squeezed my hand with her calloused, hard-working one. "Son, you're doing the right thing. Protecting our children is the most important thing in the world. Your father and I are proud of you." We returned to Richmond refreshed. Preston was stronger, more confident, with a new spark in his eyes. His grades in school began to improve. At home, he started drawing again, telling stories, being a child again. The case in court continued its course. There were more hearings, more testimonies. Serena continued to deny everything, but her own attitudes betrayed her. During one particularly tense testimony, when she was confronted with the evidence, she lost control and screamed, "Yes, I hit him. It was for his own good, so he wouldn't be a failure like his father." The entire courtroom fell silent. Even her lawyer seemed shocked. That outburst sealed her fate. In September, 6 months after the night I discovered the truth, the judge issued the sentence. Serena would lose custody of Preston. She would still have the right to monthly supervised visits if Preston wished, but custody would be exclusively mine. Additionally, she was convicted of abuse with a 2-year sentence, which could be served under house arrest with community service. When the judge announced the decision, I felt an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. I looked at Preston sitting next to me and saw that he was crying silently. "Is everything okay, son?" I asked, concerned. He nodded, wiping his tears with his shirt sleeve. "I'm relieved, Dad. Just that." Leaving the courthouse, Preston surprised me with a question. "Dad, can we go live in North Carolina? With Grandpa and Grandma?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "We can think about that, yes. But what about school? And your friends?" "I can study there. Friends. There are more animals there, more space. We can fish every day." The idea was tempting. Returning to my roots, raising my son in the same healthy environment where I grew up, near my aging parents. "I'm going to request a transfer to the North Carolina office," I decided. It shouldn't be difficult since they need experienced people inland. Preston's eyes sparkled. "Really, Dad? We're going?" "Yes, son. A new start for the two of us." In the following weeks, we organized our move. I sold the house in Richmond with the judge's authorization, as part of it belonged to Serena. I got the transfer to North Carolina with a small reduction in salary, but nothing that would compromise our living. The neighbors held a small farewell party. Preston, who used to be almost invisible to most people, was now the center of attention, receiving hugs, advice, and well wishes. Ms. Thompson, our faithful neighbor, cried as she hugged at us. "I'm going to miss both of you, but you're doing the right thing. Starting over, far from here." On the last day before leaving, Serena appeared at the door. She was thin, dejected, without the arrogance of before. Preston hid behind me, fearful. "I came to say goodbye," she said in a hoarse voice. "And to apologize." I stood in silence, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to chase her away. Another part saw a broken woman, possibly remorseful. "Preston," she called, trying to look at the son who was hiding. "I know I did horrible things, that I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I recognize my mistakes." Slowly, Preston stepped out from behind me. He looked at his mother with a maturity no child should have. "I forgive you," he said simply, "but I don't want to live with you anymore." Serena nodded, all tears streaming down her face. "Oh, I understand. You have a good father, Preston, better than I deserved." She looked at me, and for an instant I saw the Serena from before, the young woman I fell in love with at the diner by the station. "Take good care of him, Jermaine. He deserves it." "I always have," I replied, "and I always will." She left, without another word, walking slowly down the dirt road, her silhouette disappearing against the setting sun. The next morning, we set off for North Carolina. A moving truck carried our few belongings, and we followed by bus, watching the landscapes gradually change from the mid-Atlantic to the coast, from the past to the future. Preston slept for part of the trip, his head resting on my shoulder. I observed his serene face, the freckles beginning to appear on his nose, the hair that needed a trim. My son, my brave boy. I knew there was much to come. The adjustment to the new school, the new city, the ghost of the trauma that wouldn't disappear overnight, the supervised visits with Serena if Preston decided to maintain them. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope. I saw a bright future ahead of us, like the waters of North Carolina, reflecting the morning sun. Here I am, Jermaine Thurman, 76 years old, sitting on the porch of my house in North Carolina, watching the sunset over the ocean. Many years have passed since that night that changed our lives, but the memory still lives in me like the tides that never cease here. Preston grew up strong and healthy in these lands. That scared boy transformed into a respected man. Today, he is a biologist. He takes care of our coast, protecting the animals he loved so much as a child. He got married at Einbanitan And he gave me 2 grandchildren, who are the joy of my old age. When I see them running free in the yard, I'm thankful I had the courage that night. Therapy helped Preston heal the invisible wounds. It took time, but he learned to trust again, not to flinch when someone raised their voice, to believe he deserved love. Dr. Rodriguez, the psychologist, continued to counsel him by letter, even after we moved. "It's a case that taught me a lot," she wrote once. Serena served her sentence. Afterward, she moved to Atlanta. In the first few years, she maintained contact through occasional letters. Preston responded to some, ignored others. It was his way of dealing with that broken relationship. When he turned 18, he decided to meet her one last time. "I need to look her in the eye as an adult dad," he explained to me, "not as the scared child I was." He came back from that meeting lighter, as if he had left a weight behind. "She no longer has power over me," he simply said. What did I learn from all this? That sometimes love isn't enough when it's mixed with hate and frustration. That the signs are always there if we have eyes to see. That children rarely lie about abuse. On the contrary, they try to hide it out of shame or fear. I learned that being a father isn't just about providing shelter and food. It's about protecting, even when that means facing the person we once loved. It's about listening to the silences, understanding the fears, noticing the changes in behavior. My decision that night saved my son. When he thanked me years later, I replied that I only did what any true father would do. We are not heroes for fulfilling our obligation to protect our children. We are monsters when we fail at that. Today, when I see cases of abuse on television, my heart aches. How many children are suffering in silence right now? How many parents are blind as I was? How many neighbors hear the crying and turn their faces away? If my story serves to open someone's eyes, then it was worth telling. If a single child is saved because an adult noticed the signs in time, then my pain and Preston's were not in vain. The truth is that no adult has the right to unleash their frustrations on an innocent child. No rigorous education justifies leaving physical or emotional scars. Children are not property. They are lives entrusted to us to protect and love. Today, when Preston brings my grandchildren to fish with me in the same ocean where I taught him, I see that the violence failed to break our Southern spirit. We broke the cycle. My son doesn't repeat with his children what he suffered. He raises them with firmness, but also with affection and respect. So, if you're watching this and you suspect that a child near you is suffering, don't hesitate, don't wait, don't close your eyes. Do something. Call the authorities. Talk to the child. Offer help. It might be their only chance. And if you were that child, you should know that it wasn't your fault. It never was. You deserved protection, and the adults around you failed you. But there is still time to heal, to start anew, to break the cycle. If this story touched your heart, leave a like so this old man can be happy. Subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss the next stories I'll tell with all my heart. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there now. Have you ever noticed signs of abuse in a child? What did you do about it? This old man is very happy to know who is listening on the other side and at what moment of your day you took the time to listen to me. A very tight hug, as big as my heart.